Hey, this strange device I've got in front of me is called the Zoom ARQ AR-48, and it's a bit of a bizarre one. I first saw this or came across this last year when I saw Gary Newman, and a member of his band had this unusual UFO LED thing, and I believe it was one of these. But when I went to look up the price, they were about £400 at the time, and lately they've been dropping in price to the extent I was able to pick one up for £99 from Gear for Music. So for 99 quid, I thought I'd take a punt at it. I'm a bit of a sucker for alternative input devices. Anything that kind of gets you out of the same patterns of thinking about melody and structure can be really helpful, especially because I'm a pretty crap piano player. So I like monomes and I like the Lindstrument and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, it arrived today. I've only had about an hour to play with it. I wanted to do a quick video of first impressions because there's a lot of people online who really seem to hate this thing or have quite strong feelings about it. There's a lot of questions about how it deals with samples and how it records things and whether it just looks cheesy or not. But from my perspective, for £100, it's worth taking a shot on. A couple of quick things to say about it. It's powered by standard wall wart plug. The power supply though is 5 volts, so you can basically run it off of a USB adapter. Just now I've basically discarded the plug completely and I'm running off USB via my laptop. The second thing to note is that it has this ring, which is the most striking part of it. The idea basically is that you can use this ring on the bass unit, or you can take it off and kind of use it as a live performance thing. It's got an accelerometer and stuff in it, so you can control the effects or the filter or whatever, and you can trigger samples with it. Now, there's a couple of weird design choices with this, and the first thing I have to note is that in order to use this wirelessly, the ring is connected with a USB cable at the moment, and in order to use it wirelessly from the bass unit or as a controller for Ableton or whatever else, you need to get 2 separate Bluetooth controllers. It's not built in with the package you get, so that means you have to go out and buy 2 separate peripherals, which might not be so bad, but they're about 30 something pounds each. So if you want to use this separately, it costs you about an extra 60 quid. There are also some other bizarre things with it. For example, in order to plug in the ring with the USB, you have to take off a rubber cover, and it just comes off like this. And that to me is inevitably going to get lost, so I may as well just chuck it away. There you go. You get this beautiful rainbow display when it powers on. So I'm just going to run through a bunch of things really quickly. Essentially, it's broken down into 4 or 5 elements. Each quarter of this circle has got a different role. On the top left, you've got your sounds or your samples, and you can manipulate them. You can change the MIDI channel that they output on, all that sort of stuff. This section here, the top right, is the song and pattern section or the sequence section, and that basically means that you create different patterns which can be 2, 3 or 4 bars long. Can't be 1 bar long, which is strange, but anyway. And then you arrange those patterns into a song using song mode, and that's the basic premise of that. Down here we've got the record and play section, which is just transport controls. Then we've got effects in this lower left quadrant. We've got these pads on the outside, which can be assigned to different sounds or different samples. If you trigger them, you hear that all the way around. The other thing is this internal ring here, and this acts as, well, it acts doubly as a step sequencer, but it also acts as your menu kind of settings selection. So each step also acts as a function. So if you hit the function button, there's all sorts of options that become available to you, like the MIDI out settings, the quantization settings. So it's quite a nice compact wee setup. What I'll do just now is I'm just going to start a new pattern so you can see that quickly. Fairly straightforward. New pattern. Every time you create a new pattern, it gets loaded with the same default samples. Some people find that to be a bit strange or annoying, that you don't start with empty banks of things and you can't import full banks of sounds at once. But that is what it is. It's kind of standard. It's the same with the Digitact, actually. Anyway, you get these samples. If you go around here, you also get some synths. Now, you can pitch all of these individual samples on a scale. If you hit the scale button over here, you can hear, and you can adjust the kind of scale in the settings, so it can be chromatic, it can be minor, major, and lots of other interesting scales. You can change the octave, etc. So for each sample, you can change a whole bunch of different settings. Over in the song section here, you can select the pad that you want to edit by using this button. Then you can edit it, and if you go along the menu, you might not be able to see it, but anyway, you can change all sorts of things, like you can add a filter, it's got ADSR, envelope, the amount that gets sent to the effects unit. You can change the LED color, which is pretty cool. And also, my favorite one, you can change an animation for each one, including the rainbow one, which is pretty cool. Now, each pad is velocity sensitive, but I've turned it off for now because they're actually quite hard to press, and I am quite weak, and I've found that it's quite difficult to get a consistent sound at a volume loud enough for me. So I've basically set it to maximum at the moment, but you can adjust the velocity that way. One thing that lots of people will want to use this for is to load your own samples on, and you can do that. It's relatively straightforward. You do so by using a standard size SD card, plugs in down the front here. You can transfer things onto the SD card whilst this is connected to your computer, so you don't have to take the SD card out, which is quite nice. The size of the SD card goes up to 512 gig. You can store a whole pile of stuff on there, and there is an audio playback limit in total of, I believe, 12 minutes in mono and 6 minutes in stereo. So it's a fair amount of time. The one big issue for me is that the way it handles files is not very good. So rather than being able to put everything into nice, neat folders on the SD card, all of your samples basically have to be dumped into one folder, which means that it can be quite difficult to find your samples. So to give you an idea of this, if we want to change the sound of this kick, for example, we would go over here. Oh, sorry, that's the color. We go into the PCM section of the menu, and the way the samples are listed here is essentially all of the built-in ones that come in their own categories. So there's kick, there's snare, clap, hi-hat, cymbal, tom, percussion, voice, synths, instruments, all that sort of stuff. And then you get to files, which is all of your stuff that's been put in on the SD card. And unlike the nice categories that the built-in samples have got, you just have this big list, which is pretty annoying. Because if you've got lots and lots of samples, you're going to spend a bit of time trying to find them. Anyway, you can preview each one by just hitting the pad. So I'm going to stick in a kick. Cool. Oh, error. Brilliant. So as you can see from there, the AR-48 is a bit tricky with the kind of files it accepts as well. I don't really know what's wrong with that particular kick. Could be the kind of file it is. Not sure. The manual says it accepts WAVs. I'll have to go back and look at that kick in particular. So what I'll do for now is I'll just add in another sample into this particular pad here, which is the tom. You can select the pad silently by hitting pattern and then hitting the button, which means you don't get the playback, which is good. So I'll just add in another random sample I've got and hope that it loads. I'll add that acid synth. Done. Cool. Thank God. So once your samples are in place, that snare's quite loud, so I'm just going to adjust this a wee bit. go to output and I'll bring the level of that down so it's kind of acceptable. Cool, that's much better. Once you've got your samples all set up the way you want them, with your LEDs, etc., as you wish them to appear, you can then move on to arranging your patterns. Now the pattern is, like I mentioned, 2, 3 or 4 bars in length. You can change the tempo. The tempo selection goes in 0.1 degrees, which is interesting. I can't find a way to do it faster than that. So it means if you want to go from like 140 to like 80, you're going to be sitting there twiddling this for a while. And I'm sure there must be a better way of doing that, but I haven't found it yet. Hopefully I'll find one later on because that's going to be a pain in the ass. You can't tap it, of course. Now what you can do is you can either program your sequence by using the inner pads as a step sequencer, or you can play them live. So what I'll do is for the kick, I'm just going to whack in the kick on the step, nice 4 to the floor. The way you do that is you select the step you want and then you select the pad you want. You can choose the duration and some other interesting settings, but here we go. So I'll input the kick there, put it on each one, and then so then if I press play, cool. Cool, nice 4 to the floor beat. And then essentially what you can do, hit record, and when I hit record you're going to hear a kind of metronome in the background, like a drumstick, and that's good. If you don't have any other sounds in yet, that can help you keep time easier, which is quite nice. You can turn that off, but I'm not going to bother for now. And like I said, you can quantize that to different degrees. So now you've got your pattern created, you're going to want to put it into some kind of arrangement, or you're going to want to do something with it. And so that's where the song part of the AR-48 comes in. Then basically what we can do is we can either arrange the patterns on the step sequencer like we did with our individual sounds, or we can add the patterns to the pads and then trigger them that way. So for example, if I press this one, well, if I select this one, I can then change the pattern to the pattern that we've just created. Annoyingly, I can't go left at the start to go all the way around, so I need to go all the way to the right to get the pattern we've just created, which is a bit of a pain in the ass, but there you go. I'm just going to add a slight variation of the pattern that I created for an example onto the next step. That should be it. So now if I trigger this one, it's a pattern we created, and it'll just loop. And then if I hit this, if you notice, it waits until the end. I think it's the end of the, yeah, it's the end of the bar before it goes on to the next one, which is pretty good because that means then you're not getting a jump in the middle of the song. So you can use that for live performance. Alternatively, you can arrange the patterns in sequence. So you would select the pad or the step that you want to add the pattern onto. You would change or tell it the length you want to play the particular pattern for. It goes from 1 bar way up to, when I looked at it earlier, it was like way over 100. So it's basically almost an unusually long length that you've got available to you, but I'll just do for 2 bars for just now. And then you hit insert down here, which you can't see, and then you would basically do that for every pattern you have, or every pattern you want in order. So I'll just add in a couple here. So now if I hit play, it plays the pattern order, which is pretty cool. Now one thing you can do, of course, while that pattern is playing, is you can still use the rest of the sample pads, which is quite nice. So that's pretty cool because it means that you've now got a few different options for using this for performance You can either have your songs all laid out step by step, or you can have each pattern assigned to a different pad and play it more like almost like an Ableton clip trigger, which is quite smart. I'm not going to look at the effects section just now because I haven't spent too much time in there, and I'm not sure how interesting it'll be me showing you different reverbs and stuff. It's fairly standard effects outboard kind of scenario. I do have to show you a few more things about this ring though, because obviously it's one of the most defining things of this controller and it's pretty unusual. You can use both the bass and the ring as separate controllers essentially for something like Ableton or whatever else. But if you want to use it wirelessly, again, you're going to have to get those separate Bluetooth controllers, which is a real pain in the arse. However, it's almost worth it just so you can take the ring off and frisbee it off somebody's head in the crowd. So I'll probably be picking those Bluetooth transmitters up at some point. But there's a couple of features about the ring in particular I want to show you. So if I go back to the pattern screen where we've got our samples, I'm going to leave it on the bass unit just now so you can see it properly. But essentially there's different things you can do. You've obviously always got access to all the samples and stuff because when it's on the bass, it's just the same as it being lifted off. You've always got access to your scales. You can trigger playback from the ring. You can solo certain instruments. You can mute certain things. You can control effects, all that sort of stuff. There's an arpeggiator, which I've not played with yet. But for actual performance, if you want to use this thing like a tambourine or something like that, then there's two pretty cool ways you can do it. If you're afraid of, picking this up when you're at the microphone and accidentally triggering samples, like how would you hold it? Then you can press this button up at the top and you basically pick a section of the ring that you want to mute. So let's do the one down here. So now this section is totally muted, so you can still play the other samples all round, but you're not in danger of triggering any here, which is quite smart. If you want to change it to a different part, you can quickly do that. Then you've got access to those. If I hit split, you'll see that each sample now takes up a full quarter of the ring rather than just a single pad. And this means that if you want to use it like a tambourine, you can. This is really good because it means that you're not going to have the problem of trying to find individual pads if all you need are a couple of different samples. So those are my first impressions of the AR-48. After reading all the criticisms online about this thing and seeing how the price had dropped so rapidly, I was kind of worried that it would be a bit of a shanner and there'd be something drastically wrong with it, or that things wouldn't make much sense. And yeah, there are some big annoyances, like I really don't like that you have to pay an extra £60 to use the thing wirelessly. That seems ludicrous to me, and the way it deals with sample management is really pretty stupid, especially because it's such an easy thing for them to fix. But aside from that, I was able to pick things up pretty quickly. In about 15-20 minutes, I had figured most of the things out, didn't have to do too much manual diving, and it seems like it'll be really good fun to play with. I'm particularly looking forward to sequencing, for example, my Eurorack and external synths with it. I don't know how much I'll be using the full song mode, but who knows, I might end up playing this in some weird electro band like a digital tambourine, and that could be terrible, but it might also be great. But for now, that's it.